I'm not trying to scare you. I swear I'm not. But I can't stand here and pretend everything's fine when it's not. I can't go through my day like normal. I need you to hear me. Really hear me. Not tomorrow. Not later when you've got more time. Right now. Because whatever you think you have time for, whatever you're planning to get to eventually, you don't have the time you think you have. It's already started. It's already here. And if you don't see what's coming, if you don't understand what's about to happen and what you're supposed to do when it does, you're going to be caught off guard in a way that I can't even let myself think about without feeling sick. Please, just watch this. All of it. Don't skip ahead. Don't scan for the highlights. Don't assume you know where it's going. You don't. I promise you, you don't. And by the time you finish, you're going to understand why. Tell us where you are watching this from so that our prayer team will pray with you. Please drop your favorite Bible verse to encourage somewhere as the days ahead terribly approach. I will begin sharing today's experience. I do not know how to start this. I have been sitting at this table for 3 days now, trying to find the right words, and every time I write something, I delete it because nothing I write feels strong enough to carry what I am trying to say. I am not a writer. I have never been the kind of person who sits down and puts things on paper, but I have to try. I have no choice but to try, because what happened to me on May 18th, 26 is not something I can carry alone. It is too heavy. It is too important. And I was told, in a way I will do my best to explain, that I was not supposed to carry it alone. So let me just say it plainly. I died on May 18th, 2026. My heart stopped on an operating table at 9:15 in the morning. For 11 minutes I was gone. No heartbeat, no brain activity, nothing. The doctors worked on me. They used the paddles. They did everything they were trained to do. And for 11 minutes it did not work, and then it did. I came back. And I came back with something, a message for my generation. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I am not the type of person who talks about visions. I grew up in a home where we went to church on Sundays, and my father believed in God the way most people believe in something they were raised with, quietly, without much examination. I believed too, but I was not someone who prayed every single day or read the Bible every morning, or talked about spiritual things at the dinner table. I was just a regular person. A man with a job and a family and a car payment and a list of things to do that never got fully finished. That was me. That is still me in many ways. Which is exactly why what happened on May 18th shook me the way it did. Because what I saw was not something I could have invented. I am not smart enough to have invented it. I do not have the kind of imagination that builds the things I was shown. What I saw came from somewhere outside of me, and I know that the way I know my own name, not because I can prove it with logic, but because some things you simply know, all the way down in your bones, and no one can argue you out of it, no matter how long they talk. I am going to tell you everything. I am going to take my time and tell you everything, from the moment my heart stopped to the moment I opened my eyes on that table. And I ask only one thing from you. I ask you to read it all the way through before you decide what you think. Just read it, that is all. On that day, we got to the hospital at 8:30. There was paperwork. There is always paperwork. I signed things and answered questions and changed into a gown that tied in the back and felt like paper. And I remember sitting on the edge of the bed in the preparation room and looking down at my own hands while I waited and thinking that they looked older than I expected. Like the hands of someone who had been doing things for a long time. I am 43 years old. I do not feel 43 most days. But sitting there in that thin gown in that cold room looking at my hands, I felt every one of those years in a way I had not felt them before. My wife stayed with me for a while before they moved me. She sat in the chair next to the bed and we talked about nothing important, the way people do when they are trying to make a moment feel normal. She mentioned something about the grocery store. I said something about needing to call my brother. Small things. The stuff that fills a Tuesday morning when you would rather be home. At some point a nurse came in to tell her that they were going to move me soon and that she could wait in the family area. My wife stood up and straightened the blanket on my legs, the way she does at home when she is tucking in one of the kids. Even though I am a grown man and did not need the blanket straightened, I did not say anything about that. I just watched her do it. She kissed me on the cheek and told me she loved me and said she would be right there when I came out. And I told her I would be fine. And she walked out through the door and turned the corner. And I watched her go until she was out of sight. And then I sat there alone for a few minutes in the quiet. I thought about nothing specific during those few minutes. I was not afraid. I was not thinking about God or about anything spiritual. I was just sitting there, a little cold, a little tired, waiting for what came next the way you wait for a bus. The preparation room was cold, the way hospitals always are. 2 nurses were moving around me, checking things, attaching things to my arm and my chest. They were kind and efficient, the kind of people who do their work with a calm that you find reassuring, even when you do not know you needed reassuring. One of them made a small joke about the temperature of the room, and I laughed. and the laughing helped with the last of the nervous feeling that had been sitting just behind my ribs all morning. I remember that laugh. I remember it clearly because it was the last ordinary thing I did. Then the anesthesiologist came in. He was a calm man, unhurried, with the kind of voice that you feel like you can trust because it never rises and never rushes. He explained what he was going to do. He asked if I had any questions. I said no. He nodded and made a note on his tablet, and then he asked me to count backward from 10. I counted 10, 9, 8, 7, and then there was nothing. I want to be careful here, because this is the part that is hardest to explain. When I say there was nothing, I do not mean darkness. I do not mean a blank space the way sleep is a blank space, where you close your eyes and then suddenly it is morning. What I mean is that one moment I was in that cold room, counting backward, and the next moment I was somewhere else entirely, and the transition between those two moments was instant. There was no middle, no corridor, no sensation of moving from one place to another. I was there, and then I was not there, and then I was somewhere that I do not have a word for. The first thing I noticed was that I was not in my body. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something from a movie or a book, but it was not like that at all. It was much simpler and much stranger than that. I just became aware gradually that the thing I was looking at below me was myself. My own body, lying on a table with people in surgical masks standing around it. I could see the top of my own head. I could see my own feet making a small shape under the sheet. I could see a monitor on the wall showing a flat line, and I could see the team moving with urgency, the way people move when something has gone wrong and time matters. Someone called out a number. Someone else moved quickly to a cart. A third person was doing compressions on my chest, pressing down with both hands in the way they train for, rhythmic and careful and urgent all at once. I watched all of this with a feeling I cannot name. Not detachment, that is the word people usually reach for, and it is not quite right. I was not detached, I was present. I was watching what was happening with full attention and full awareness, but I was watching it from outside of fear, outside of panic, outside of the automatic self-protective instincts that fire in a body when the body is in danger. All of that was below me, with the body. Where I was, there was none of it. What there was instead, and I have tried to describe this to my wife and to one or two other people I trust, and I have failed every time, but I will try again here, was something that felt like being completely known. Not watched, not observed, known. Like every part of me, every thought I had ever thought, and everything I had ever done, and every feeling I had ever tried to hide was visible and present and held without judgment. It is the closest I can come to explaining the peace. It was not peace because nothing bad was happening. It was peace because I was in the presence of something that knew everything about me and was not troubled by any of it. I stayed in that state, looking down at the room, for what might have been a few seconds or might have been much longer. Time was not working the way it normally works. That is something I want to say clearly, because it matters for what came next. Time was not a line. It was more like a space I was standing in, and I could feel the whole of it around me rather than moving through it one moment after another the way we normally do. And then something changed. I became aware that I was moving, though I could not feel motion the way you feel motion in a car or on a plane. It was more like the world was changing around me while I stayed still. The hospital ceiling was above me, and then it was not. The hospital was simply gone, replaced by something I struggle to describe. It was not a place in the way that a room is a place. It was more like a state of being, a quality of space, something that felt enormous and close at the same time. And then I was being shown things. That is the best way I can put it. I was being shown. There was no one standing in front of me giving me a lecture. There was no screen or book or map laid out before me. The knowledge and the images came from all around and from inside me at the same time, the way sound fills a room. You cannot point to exactly where it is coming from, but you feel it everywhere. What I saw completely. What I understood all the way down, with no confusion and no ambiguity. The first thing I was shown was darkness, not spiritual darkness, not symbolic darkness, actual physical, total darkness spreading across the United States of America. I was looking at the country from above, not from airplane height, but from much higher, as if I were looking at a map, except the map was alive and real, and I could feel the weight of what was happening in it. The lights were going out. Not all at once, but in a wave, a fast-moving wave that started at the edges and moved toward the center, the way a flame burns inward on a piece of paper. The coasts went dark first, then the cities in the middle, then the small towns, then everything, and when it was done, the entire country was dark. I understood what had happened the same way you understand things in dreams sometimes. Not because someone explained it, but because the understanding was simply there, placed inside you. What had happened was an electromagnetic pulse. Something had been sent into the atmosphere or triggered in a way that killed the power grid. Not just turned it off the way a storm turns off power, killed it. Destroyed it at a level that would take not days or weeks but months to rebuild, if rebuilding was even possible in the chaos that would follow. The darkness did not feel like a side effect. It felt like a strategy. It felt like the first move in something that had been planned for a long time by people who understood exactly what they were doing and had chosen this specific moment to do it. The date was revealed to me, June 15th, 2026. That was when the darkness began. I need to pause here for a moment because even writing this now, I feel the same cold feeling I felt when I first understood what I was looking at. A whole country, dark, not for an hour, not for a weekend. The darkness I was shown had no end in sight. The people in it were just beginning to understand that this was not a regular outage, that help was not coming, that the systems they had trusted to always be there, the systems so woven into every part of daily life that most people had never stopped to think about them, were simply gone. I sat with that for what felt like a long time, though time was not working the way it normally works. And then I was shown the next thing. The scene that came next was difficult to watch, not because of blood or violence in the way a war movie has violence. It was difficult because of what it meant. Because of what it said about how much had been planned and how long the planning had been going on. I saw the southern border of the United States, the desert, long stretches of flat land with nothing on them for miles, the kind of terrain where you can stand and see in every direction, and there is nothing but dust and low plants and the occasional rock formation against the sky. I have been to that part of the country only once in my life, but I recognized it, and what I saw moving through it was not something that belonged there. Military vehicles, convoys, tanks and armored trucks and personnel carriers moving in organized lines through the desert, not through official border crossings or highways but through open land, through dry riverbeds, through the gaps that exist in places where no one is watching. They moved quietly and with purpose, the way something moves when it has been rehearsed many times. Something was revealed to me about this that I want to get exactly right, because it matters. The reason this was possible, the reason a military force could move through the American Southwest without being detected and intercepted, was the darkness. The darkness was not an accident that happened before the invasion. The darkness was the preparation for the invasion. You cannot move armies through a nation that has functioning satellites watching from above. You cannot coordinate an operation of this size against a country whose communication systems are working and whose military is receiving real-time intelligence. But you can do it when the lights are out. You can do it in the 10 days after an EMP has knocked out the grid and everyone is still trying to figure out what happened. The darkness came first because the darkness was necessary. I saw smoke rising over Texas, then over parts of Arizona. I saw the beginning of something that the people living through it would not have a name for yet, because the names for things only come later, after historians have had time to sit down and piece together what happened in what order. In the middle of it, there are no names. There is only what you can see with your own eyes, and hear with your own ears, and feel in your own chest. The dates connected to this vision were between June 18th and June 20th. That was when the movement through the South began in earnest, when the convoys were deep enough into American territory that turning back was no longer the plan. I want to say something here about the feeling I had while watching all of this, because I was not watching it the way you watch something terrible on the news, from a distance behind a screen where you can change the channel or close the app if it becomes too much. I was watching it from inside the reality of it. I could feel the size of it. I could feel how many lives were being touched by what I was seeing. And the peace I had felt when I first left my body was still there. It had not gone anywhere, but alongside the peace there was a grief. A real and heavy grief that had nothing sentimental about it. It was the grief of someone who has been shown a true thing, and knows it is true and knows it is painful and cannot pretend otherwise. I think that grief is part of why I am writing this, because the grief does not let you stay quiet. After the desert and the smoke, I was shown a coast. I was above San Francisco, or above what I understood to be San Francisco, and I was looking at the bay. The Golden Gate Bridge was there. I have seen pictures of it many times. It is a famous thing, one of those structures that becomes so familiar through photographs and films that you feel like you know it even if you have never stood next to it. I was looking at it from above, and then I was shown what happened to it. It was not an earthquake. I want to be very clear about that, because the geography of that area is such that an earthquake would have been the easy explanation, the obvious explanation, the one that people would reach for first when they were trying to make sense of what they were seeing. But what I witnessed was not a geological event. What happened to that bridge was done deliberately, by people who knew exactly what they were doing and had planned it carefully. The destruction was precise. There were specific points of impact, chosen by people who understood engineering and who understood exactly where to strike in order to bring something that large and that strong to the ground. I watched the bridge come down, and I will not describe it in more detail than that because the detail is not the point. The point is that it fell, and that it was made to fall, and that the chaos that followed in San Francisco was immediate and profound. But then, and this is the part that has stayed with me more than the bridge itself, the vision widened, and I was no longer looking at a city. I was looking at the countryside. at small towns. There was one in particular. The name that came to me was Gorm, a small town, the kind of place that most people have never heard of and probably never will. And I saw its main street, the center of it, the part where people would shop and get coffee, and walk their dogs and take their children to the small local library, and I saw it destroyed. The destruction looked, on the surface, like something that had fallen from the sky. The pattern of it, the way the ground was cratered and the buildings had caved inward, suggested something coming from above at great speed. I understood that this is what it would be called: meteor fragments, space debris, something natural and cosmic that no one could have predicted or prevented. The story that would be told later would have that shape. A terrible coincidence, an act of nature, nothing that pointed toward human hands, but I knew that was not the truth. The same thing that showed me the bridge being brought down with precision showed me that these towns were targeted, that the destruction that looked like it came from outer space was not from outer space. It came from above, yes, but it was made by people, and the towns that were not hit randomly. I do not know the full logic of why they were chosen. I only know that they were chosen, and that the people living in them had believed, the way most of us believe about the place we live, that distance from the cities would protect them. It did not protect them. This is the detail that I have thought about the most in the weeks since May 18th, because there is something deeply frightening about the idea that small, quiet, faraway places are not safe. Most of the fear people carry about disaster is a city fear, a fear of being in a crowded place when something goes wrong. The instinct, when things fall apart, is to get out of the city, get to the country, get somewhere remote. That instinct is not wrong in every situation. But what I was shown suggests that in this specific sequence of events, that instinct, if acted upon, would have led people out of whatever shelter they had and into something worse. I noted the date, June 21st, the bridge in the towns, June 21st. What came next was the part that made me cry. I did not know you could cry without a body, but something in me responded to what I was shown in a way that felt like tears. And I believe that is what it was. Even if it did not work quite the way crying works when you are alive and standing in a kitchen or sitting in a car. I was shown a sickness. I want to be careful with how I describe this, because I do not want to exaggerate and I do not want to panic anyone beyond what the warning itself requires. What I was shown was real and it was serious, but I was also shown in the same vision that it was survivable, that there was a way through it. So let me hold both of those things together as I tell you what I saw. A biological agent. Those are the words that came to me when I was trying to put a name to what I was witnessing. Something engineered, something made in a lab by people who understood disease and how it moves and how to make it move faster and more effectively than it would on its own. It was released during the chaos, during the period when the grid was down and the military situation in the South was ongoing, and the destruction of places like the bridge and the small towns had already sent people into a kind of collective shock. Released at the exact moment when emergency systems were most strained and people were least equipped to recognize what was happening and respond to it. It moved through animals first. Livestock. The kind of animals that people in rural areas keep close, that share land and sometimes structures with the families that tend them. It moved through that population quickly, and then it made the jump to people, and then it moved person to person with an efficiency that told me everything I needed to know about whether it was natural or made. Natural viruses are messy. They mutate unpredictably. They have weaknesses that emerge over time. What I was shown did not behave like a natural virus. It behaved like something that had been studied and adjusted and optimized by people who wanted it to do exactly what it was doing. I watched people lock themselves in their homes. Not because the government told them to. The government's ability to communicate anything at all was severely limited by the darkness, but because they could feel that something was in the air. Because the instinct to close the door and cover the windows is older than civilization, older than science, older than the germ theory of disease. Something in people knew. The mortality rate was high. That is all I will say about the number, because I was not shown a specific figure, only the faces of survivors, and those faces told me enough. But here is what else I was shown, and this is the thing I need you to hear above everything else I have said so far. There was protection available. Something was revealed to me about a specific window of time, 10 days, from June 20th to June 29th, during which people who prayed and stayed in their homes were kept safe. Not safe in a comfortable sense, not safe in the sense of knowing everything was fine and feeling no fear, but safe in the sense that the thing moving through the air and through populations did not reach them. I saw light around those homes. Not dramatic light, not the kind of light you see in a movie about angels. Just a quality of protection, a covering, something that I understood to be the answer to the prayers being offered inside those walls. The people praying were not special. That is something I want to be very clear about. They were not more righteous than their neighbors. They were not people who had done everything right, or said all the right prayers, or followed all the right rules. They were ordinary people who had heard a warning, some version of it, from some source, and who had chosen to believe it enough to act on it. They stayed. They prayed. They did not go outside to see what was happening. They did not panic and try to flee. They trusted the instruction, and they stayed. And they were kept. The people who went out, and I watched this, and it was painful to watch, did not all die. I want to be careful not to make this sound like a simple equation, where going outside equals death and staying inside equals life. It was not that clean. But many who went out in those specific 10 days, who went looking for information or for family members, or who simply could not stand the not knowing and stepped outside, many of those people encountered the biological agent in ways that had terrible consequences. Some survived, some did not. The instruction was specific. Pray, stay inside. These 10 days are the window. Do not let fear or curiosity or panic override the instruction. The 10 days run from June 20th through June 29th, and they are not random. They are given. They are a grace. I stayed in that vision for what felt like a very long time. I watched families sitting together in darkened rooms, praying quietly, whispering, holding each other. I watched people who had chosen to believe the warning, even though they had no rational way to confirm it. Even though the world outside was producing every kind of pressure to go out and do something, to move, to flee, to act. They held still, they prayed, and the light around their homes did not waver. The last thing I was shown, the final vision, came with a stillness that was different from everything before it. Everything before it had been moving. The darkness spreading, the convoys through the desert, the bridge coming down, the sickness moving through populations. All of it had been motion, had been events unfolding in sequence, one thing leading to another with a terrible and relentless momentum. But the final thing I was shown had no motion in it at all. It was like standing at the edge of something vast and feeling the edge of it without being able to see the other side. I was shown the sky, not a specific sky over a specific place. Just the sky, enormous and present, and something changing in it, a quality of light that had nothing to do with the sun or with any natural source. A sound, not an explosion, not thunder. A single clear sound, like a trumpet, but also not exactly like a trumpet. The kind of sound that you do not hear so much as feel in every cell of your body. A sound that carries meaning in itself, the way a human voice carries meaning before you have even understood the words. Something was revealed to me in that moment that I am going to struggle to put in words, and I want to try to be honest about that struggle rather than pretending I have language that I do not have. What I understood, what was placed in me during that sound and that light, was that what I had been watching, the darkness and the invasion and the destruction and the sickness, was not the end of something. It was the beginning. The beginning of a period that has been written about and spoken about and prayed about for a very long time. And that this final moment, June 29th, was a door. A real door with a real threshold. And on one side of it was one kind of world, and on the other side was another kind. And the door would not stay open. I was told something directly in that moment. Not in a voice that I heard with ears because I did not have ears. But the communication was clear and complete. The way light through a window is clear and complete even though you cannot hold it in your hand. What was communicated to me was this, and I am going to do my best to put it plainly without adding to it or taking away from it. The dates were given to me deliberately. June 15th is when the darkness begins. June 29th is when the door closes. Between them are 10 specific days, June 20th through June 29th, during which prayer and shelter are not just suggestions but necessities. The sequence is specific. Darkness first, then the breach from the south, then destruction of visible landmarks and quiet towns, then the biological threat that moves through the confusion. That is the order. And at the end of it, the 29th, something changes that will not change back. The instruction I was given was to warn people, not to frighten them into paralysis, but to warn them the way you warn a friend who is about to step into traffic, firmly, directly, because the love you have for them leaves you no room for politeness. Warn them. Then I was back. I came back into my body the way a stone dropped into water goes back down after it breaks the surface, fast and sudden and without any graceful transition. One moment I was in that vast and quiet place with the light and the sound. And then I was on a table, gasping, with the sound of monitors and the smell of antiseptic and the feeling of the paddles still warm on my chest. My eyes opened and the ceiling of the operating room was above me, ordinary white ceiling tiles, and I could feel my own heartbeat, which felt strange after being without it, like hearing a familiar sound after a long time of silence. Strange but good, strange but enormously, overwhelmingly good. One of the nurses was talking to me. I could hear her voice but not the words at first. The sounds of the room were coming in layers, the way sound comes when you are just waking up from a very deep sleep and your brain is still putting itself back together. I lay there on the table not trying to speak yet, just breathing, feeling the air move in and out of my lungs, feeling the weight of my own arms, feeling the texture of the sheet under my hands. All of it felt like information I had been away from and was receiving again for the first time, and all of it felt like a gift. Gradually the sounds sharpened. The nurse asked me if I could hear her. I said yes. She asked me to squeeze her hand, and I did. Someone else in the room said something to someone else. and there was a quality of relief in the voices around me that I recognized even in my half-present state. They had been frightened. They had worked on me for 11 minutes, and now I was back, and the fear in the room was releasing itself the way tension releases from a muscle when you finally let it go. They moved me to a recovery room. I do not remember much about that move. I remember a ceiling going by above me, different tiles than the operating room, and I remember the sound of wheels on a smooth floor, and I remember thinking, very clearly and quietly, that I needed to remember everything. That forgetting was not an option, that I had been given something, and the giving came with an obligation, and the obligation was not going to let me rest until I had fulfilled it. My wife came in later. She had been in the waiting room for hours, and she later told me that at some point, a doctor came out and told her there had been a complication, that my heart had stopped and they had worked to bring me back, and that I was stable now, but she should wait a little longer. She said she sat back down in that waiting room chair and she prayed. She is not someone who prays loudly or with a lot of words. She is someone who gets very still and very quiet when things are serious, and she said she got very still and very quiet in that waiting room chair, and she prayed the only prayer she could think of, which was just my name over and over offered up to whoever was listening. When she came through the door of the recovery room and saw me awake with my eyes open and looking at her, she started crying before she even reached the bed. She crossed the room fast and she sat next to me and took both my hands in both of hers and just held them, and I could feel her hands shaking slightly. The small tremor of someone who has been holding themselves together for a long time and is now finally allowed to stop. I did not try to tell her anything yet, not yet. I held her hands and I looked at her face and I thought about the fact that I had come back to this face, to this person, and that the coming back was its own kind of grace, separate from and alongside the vision, the plain and ordinary grace of still being here. We sat like that for a while without speaking. The monitor beside the bed made its steady sound. The light in the room was the flat and neutral light of a hospital afternoon. My wife eventually stopped shaking and started just sitting, and I lay there beside her, alive. The calendar on the wall of the recovery room said May 18th, 2026. I lay there looking at that calendar for a long time. May 18th. And somewhere ahead of me on the calendar, still weeks away, June 15th was waiting. June 20th was waiting. June 29th was waiting. All of it already decided. All of it already real, in whatever sense the things I had been shown were real. I had been gone for 11 minutes. I had been shown events that would unfold over 28 days in June. And I had come back with knowledge I had not carried into that operating room, knowledge that sat in me like a stone, not heavy in a bad way, but solid, real, unmoving. The kind of thing that you know without knowing how you know it. The kind of thing that was not in you before and now is, and you understand that it will be in you for the rest of your life. In the days that followed, I did not talk about it immediately. The doctors wanted me to rest. They ran tests and asked me questions and monitored my heart with wires attached to my chest and talked among themselves about what had happened and what needed to happen next. I answered their questions honestly, and I followed their instructions, and I was grateful for the care they were giving me. But inside, underneath all the clinical activity, I was sitting with what I had been shown, turning it over, looking at every detail of it, checking it against itself, if that makes sense. The way you check a memory against itself when you are trying to understand whether it is reliable. Every time I checked it, it held. I wrote things down, I wrote dates and images, and as much as I could put into words of what I had experienced. Not because I was afraid I would forget. I have not forgotten a single detail, and I believe I never will, but because writing things down helped me see the shape of them, the sequence, the way one thing connected to the next. The darkness on the 15th, then the breach from the south on the 18th through the 20th, then the bridge and the small towns on the 21st, then the biological threat spreading through the 10 days of the 20th through the 29th. The shape of it was deliberate, not random, not chaotic, a sequence designed to overwhelm a nation step by step, each stage made possible by the stage before it. I prayed a great deal during those weeks of recovery. I asked to be shown if I was wrong. I asked for correction if I had misunderstood anything. I asked for the grace to hold what I had been given, without letting it become something it was not, without adding to it, or taking away from it, or wrapping it in my own fears and interpretations. I received no correction. The vision remained exactly as it had come to me, every detail exactly as it was, every date exactly as it had been given. I have spent a lot of time thinking about why I was chosen to receive this. I want to be honest with you. I do not think it was because I am special. I do not think it was because of some exceptional righteousness on my part, because I know who I am and I know my life, and there is nothing in it that would single me out for that kind of honor. I think the reason I was shown these things is simpler and less flattering than that. I think I was shown them because I was there. Because a door opened that morning on that table, and I happened to be on the threshold, and the things I was shown were waiting to be shown to someone. I also want to be honest about something else. There were days during my recovery when I did not want to share this. Days when I thought about what it would cost me to put this in writing, what people would say, how they would look at me, what it would do to the way my neighbors see me and the way my coworkers think of me, and the way people who have known me for 20 years would suddenly wonder about my mental health. I thought about all of that. I thought about it more than I am comfortable admitting. I am not a brave person by nature. I do not enjoy being looked at or talked about. I like to move through my days quietly, doing my work and coming home to my family and not drawing attention to myself. The idea of putting my name on something like this, something that most reasonable people will read and dismiss, that idea was uncomfortable enough that I sat on it for several weeks. But the thing that finally made me write it was not courage. It was the feeling I had every morning when I woke up and had not yet written it. A heaviness. A weight that sat on my chest from the moment I opened my eyes, a sense of something left undone, something owed. I would lie in bed in the early morning dark and feel the weight of it, and I would think about the people I was not warning. People I knew and people I did not know. Families who had no reason to expect what was coming. People who would be caught completely off guard, who did not have the information that might have made the difference. That thought, those faces I imagined, the ones I did not know, that was what eventually got me to the table with a pen in my hand. Not bravery, just the weight of an obligation I could not put down no matter how hard I tried. What matters is not why it was me. What matters is that it was shown. What matters is that I was told to warn people. What matters is that June 15th is coming, and then June 20th, and then June 29th. And between those dates, there are 10 days that have been identified as days of protection, 10 days during which the instruction is simple and difficult in equal measure. Pray and stay inside, and do not let fear make you move when the instruction is to be still. I know there will be people who read this and roll their eyes. I know there will be people who use the word hypoxia, who talk about oxygen-deprived brains and the visions they produce, who have very reasonable and scientific explanations for what happened to me. I do not argue with those people. I cannot argue with them, because I cannot prove what I experienced, and I would not know how to begin. What I can tell you is what I know, and what I know is that what I was shown felt more real than anything I have experienced with my waking mind and my open eyes. I can tell you that the peace I felt when I was outside my body was not a product of confusion or desperation. It was the clearest state I have ever been in. Clearer than any conversation I have had, any decision I have made, any moment I have lived through. Whatever was happening to my brain chemistry, whatever the doctors choose to say about oxygen and neurons and the stories a dying brain tells itself, none of that explanation touches the quality of what I experienced. I was clear, I was shown true things, I know the difference. I can tell you that the dates and the sequence have not changed in my mind by even one detail in all the weeks since May 18th. I can tell that I was told to warn people, and so I am warning people, and I am doing it as plainly and as clearly and as humbly as I know how. If you are reading this before June 15th, then you have time. Use it. Draw close to your family. Draw close to your faith. Think about what you would need if the power went out for more than a few days, not in a panic-buying way, but in a thoughtful way. Think about where you will be and who you will be with. Pray. Pray now while the world is still ordinary, while the lights are still on, while prayer feels optional rather than urgent. Pray now so that prayer is already a habit by the time the 10 days arrive. If you are reading this between June 15th and June 20th, the darkness has already begun. Keep your family close. Do not travel unnecessarily. Pray together. The harder part is coming, but the protection is also coming, and the protection is real. If you are reading this between June 20th and June 29th, then you are inside the 10 days. Stay inside. Do not let the sound of what is happening outside pull you through the door. I know how hard that is. I know the human instinct to act, to move, to go and see and try to do something. I am telling you as directly as I know how to tell you anything. The instruction for these specific days is not to act. The instruction is to pray and to stay. The protection I was shown was not around the people who were out trying to help or trying to gather information or trying to understand what was happening. The protection was around the people who were inside, who had heard some version of this warning and had believed it enough to stay. Believe it enough to stay. And if you are reading this after June 29th, then one of two things is true. Either the events did not unfold the way I was shown, in which case I ask you to pray and ask God what the vision meant, because I believe a warning that is received and acted upon in faith can change what it was warning against, and I would rather be wrong about the dates and have you alive and praying than be right, and have you caught unprepared. Or the events did unfold, and you are on the other side of them, and you are still here, and you are reading these words in whatever world exists after June 29th. If that is where you are, then I want to tell you something. The fact that you are still reading means you are still alive. And that means the story is not over for you. Whatever comes next, whatever the world looks like after those 10 days, the God who showed me the protection and the light around those homes is still the God who holds the next day. and the day after that. The door that closed on June 29th was not the door to hope. It was a door in a sequence of events, and on the other side of it, you are still here, and that matters. There is one more thing I want to say before I finish. I have been back in my body for weeks now, and in that time I have done my best to live normally. I have had meals with my wife. I have watched the evening news. I have gone for walks in my neighborhood and seen children playing in yards, and people washing their cars and neighbors talking over fences, all the ordinary small details of ordinary American life. And every single one of those details has felt precious to me in a way it never did before May 18th. There is a light on ordinary things that I did not notice before. On my wife's face, on the way the evening comes in through the kitchen window, on the sound of my own breathing, all of it precious, all of it temporary in a way that it always was but that I did not feel before. Now I feel it all the time. I think about the people I have seen in my neighborhood, the ones walking their dogs in the early morning when it is still cool, the ones who wave from their driveways. I think about them and I want to say something to them, not to frighten them, not to make their Tuesday mornings strange and heavy, but to tell them that what they have right now, this ordinary Tuesday morning, is something to hold carefully, something that deserves a moment of attention before we all rush past it toward whatever comes next on the schedule. I did not know before May 18th how to be grateful for Tuesday morning. I was too busy moving through it to notice it. That is not a criticism of myself or of anyone else. That is just how life works when you are inside it and healthy and have no particular reason to stop and look. You move through Tuesday morning because Wednesday is coming and there is work to do and a list that never gets finished. But when you have been taken out of Tuesday morning entirely, when the body that carries you through it stops for 11 minutes and you find yourself somewhere outside of time altogether, and then you are given Tuesday morning back, given it again as a second thing rather than a continuing thing, it is different. You see it differently. You feel it differently. Every small thing, it has weight. I think that might be part of what I was supposed to bring back. Not just the warning, as important as the warning is, but also this, the understanding that what we have is precious. That the ordinary days, the unremarkable mornings, the coffee and the car payments and the lists of things to do, all of it is a gift, a real gift. Not one we earned or deserve, just one we were given and one that can be taken away in an instant and one that is worth protecting with every prayer we have in us. I was sent back because the warning needed to be delivered. That I believe completely. But I also wonder sometimes, in the quiet of early morning, when the house is still, and I am sitting alone with my coffee, whether the warning was not the only reason. Whether part of what I was sent back with was not just information but also instruction, how to pay attention, how to be present, how to hold the ordinary day like it matters, because it does. Because every ordinary day is a day that someone did not get and you did, and that means something. My wife asked me last week if I was afraid. She meant in general, afraid of what I had seen, afraid of the dates coming. I sat with the question for a moment before I answered because I wanted to answer it honestly. And the honest answer is no. Not in the way I was afraid before May 18th of small things, of embarrassment, of failure, of what people might think. That kind of fear has become very quiet in me. What replaced it is something closer to urgency, a desire to use the time well. A desire to make sure that the people I love know that I love them, and that anyone who needs to hear a warning has a chance to hear one. The lights are still on as I write this. Pray that they stay on. And pray that if they go out, you are somewhere safe, somewhere covered, somewhere inside those walls of light that I saw around the homes of the people who chose to believe and to stay. That is everything I have to tell you. I have held nothing back. I have added nothing that was not given to me. I have done my best, with the language I have and the writing ability I have, which is limited, to give you what I was given on May 18th, 2026, on a table, in 11 minutes, while my wife sat in a waiting room not knowing what was happening to the person she loved. She was praying my name. I believe that prayer reached somewhere. I believe it was heard. And I believe that the God who heard it is the same God who held those families in their darkened homes during the 10 days, and the God who placed this testimony in my hands and said, write it down and give it to them. Read it again if you need to. Share it if you feel the same urgency I feel. And pray. Above everything else, pray. The time is shorter than we think. The sequence is already in motion. And the 10 days are given, not as a punishment, not as a test, but as a mercy. A door held open by a God who does not want anyone to be caught outside it when it closes. Do not be outside when it closes. To the body of Christ, the called out ones, the elect of God scattered across the nations. Hear now the burden that weighs upon the heart of every true watchman who stands upon the walls of Zion. For the Spirit of the Lord is speaking with an urgency that cannot be ignored, with a clarity that pierces through the noise of this age. This is not a season for the faint of heart, nor is it a time for those who would call themselves by the name of Christ to linger in the outer courts of complacency. The hour is late, the day approaches, and that which has been spoken in the secret chambers of heaven is even now descending upon the earth with the inevitability of dawn breaking after the longest night. Therefore I charge you, yes, I adjure you by the mercies of God and by the precious blood of the Lamb that was slain, be prayerful. Do not treat prayer as a religious accessory, as some optional add-on to your busy schedule. Prayer is the very breath of the believer, the lifeline that tethers your soul to the throne of grace. In these days when the foundations are being shaken, when the traditions of men are being exposed as the shifting sand they always were, you must be a people of prayer. Set your alarms for the watches of the night. Rise while the world still sleeps and pour out your heart before the one who neither slumbers nor sleeps. The prayer closet is not a relic of a bygone era. It is the war room of the saint, the place where battles are won before they are ever fought in the open. Do you not see the storm clouds gathering? Do you not perceive the rumblings beneath your feet? This is not the time for casual Christianity. This is not the time for the lukewarm, the double-minded, those who would serve two masters. The fire is coming, and it will purify, and it will refine, and it will consume everything that is not anchored in the eternal. But to those who pray, to those who seek his face with the desperation of a man seeking water in a parched land, there will be given a peace that surpasses understanding, a wisdom that confounds the wise, and a discernment that cuts through the deception like a two-edged sword. And hear this with the gravity with which it is spoken. Asterisk, stick to your Bible. Do not deviate from the word of God, not one step to the right nor one step to the left. The scriptures are not suggestions, they are commandments. They are not opinions, they are oracles. In this season of rampant deception, when false prophets abound and itching ears seek out teachers who will tell them what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear, you must be anchored to the rock of God's unchanging word. Read it when you feel like it and read it when you don't. Study it in the morning, meditate upon it in the evening, hide it in your heart that you might not sin against the Lord. The Bible is not a book of the past. It is the living, active, piercing word that discerns the thoughts and intentions of the heart. It is your roadmap through the wilderness, your compass in the fog, your sword in the battle. When the enemy whispers lies, counter him with "it is written." When your own heart doubts, remind yourself of the promises that cannot be broken. When the culture pressures you to conform, remember that you are a pilgrim and a sojourner, a citizen of a kingdom that is not of this world, and this book is your constitution, your charter, your covenant. But there is more, beloved. The Lord is not silent. He is speaking, and he will continue to speak to those who have ears to hear. Asterisk, you will receive instruction from the Lord in this phase of life. This is not the time to look to the left or to the right for direction. This is not the time to follow the crowd or to take counsel from the fearful. The shepherd is calling his sheep by name, and his sheep know his voice. They will not follow a stranger. They will flee from him, for they do not recognize the voice of strangers. You must cultivate the art of listening. In the cacophony of voices, social media, news cycles, political pundits, well-meaning friends, and even religious leaders who may have drifted from the narrow path, you must learn to distinguish the still small voice of the Spirit. He will guide you into all truth. He will show you things to come. He will give you specific instructions for your specific situation. Where to go, where not to go, what to say, what to hold your peace about, when to act, and when to wait with patience that only comes from above. Do not despise the day of small beginnings, nor the quiet whispers in your spirit. Do not dismiss the dreams, the impressions, the sudden knowing that comes upon you as you are praying. Test everything by the word, yes, but do not harden your heart to the prophetic. God is raising up a people who will not be moved, who will not be shaken, who will not be bought or sold, because they have received instruction directly from the throne room. They do not need to ask, "What do the nations say?" because they have heard what the Lord says. And here is the anchor that holds this all together. Asterisk, that which God reveals will soon come to pass. The revelations you are receiving, the warnings, the preparations, the strategic insights, the burden for prayer, the sense that something momentous is on the horizon. Do not dismiss these as mere emotionalism or anxiety. God is not a man that he should lie. When he speaks, it is because he is setting things in motion. When he reveals, it is because the event is already certain in the heavenly realms and is merely awaiting its manifestation in time and space. You are not being prepared for nothing. You are not being called to prayer without reason. You are not being anchored to the word because of some arbitrary religious exercise. No, there is a convergence coming. There is a fulfillment approaching. The words spoken by the prophets of old, the promises given to the patriarchs, the visions of the apocalypse, the longings of the saints throughout the centuries. They're all converging toward a climax that will stagger the imagination of the unprepared, but will be the vindication of those who have waited upon the Lord. Therefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, be vigilant. Your adversary prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, but he cannot devour the one who is hidden in Christ, who is covered by the blood, who is filled with the Spirit, and who walks in obedience to the revealed will of God. Do not be among those who say, "Where is the promise of his coming?" Do not be numbered with the scoffers who follow after their own lusts. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. You were born for such a time as this. The fact that you are alive right now, reading these words, breathing this air, facing these challenges, it is not an accident. It is divine appointment. God has preserved you, sustained you, refined you, and positioned you for this exact moment in history. So rise up, O sleeper, shake off the dust of lethargy, cast aside the weights that so easily entangle. Run with endurance the race that is set before you, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith. Be prayerful without ceasing. Be devoted to the scriptures with the hunger of a man who knows they are his only sustenance. Be expectant of divine instruction, tuning your spiritual ears to frequencies the world cannot hear. And be ready, for the revelation is becoming reality, the promise is becoming present, and the King is coming. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all, now and unto the day of his appearing. Amen and amen.